When I was 8 years old, I heard a legend from the villagers. They said that on the mountain behind the village, there was a monster with a human body and the head of a pig. But this monster only appeared on rainy days. The villagers were terrified. No one dared to go outside whenever it rained, until that evening. Turnthur managed to capture the pig-headed monster. He even tied it up with a rope. For the first time, the villagers saw its true appearance. It was not very tall, almost the same height as me. Nothing like the towering figure from the old legends. Turnthur laughed and asked, "Does anyone want to buy pork?" The villagers exchanged glances. Some whispered among themselves, and finally a few brave men spoke up. "Uncle Tern, we are all from the same village. Why would you take money from us?" Turnthur gave them an unfriendly look. He said coldly, "I risked my life going into the mountain during the storm to catch this monster. I almost didn't survive." As he spoke, he lifted his right leg to show them. The skin on his thigh was badly bruised and swollen, with clear marks of pig's teeth biting into him. He continued, "If you don't pay, don't expect any meat." The villagers fell silent. Our village seemed cursed. No one had ever lived past 60. The only person who had lived beyond that age was Blind Tern, who long ago had eaten the flesh of a pig-headed monster. So people believed that to live past 60, one must eat its meat. No one argued further. Those with money paid. Those without could only stand aside, hoping to get a leftover piece once others had bought theirs. Turnthur called for help. A few young men came forward, pressing the monster to the ground. Turnthur raised a sharp knife and stabbed it. The crowd roared. Everyone rushed forward, eager to grab the best cuts of meat. I was pushed to the edge of the crowd. From behind, I felt a chill running down my spine. It was as though a pair of hateful eyes were staring at me. Soon the pig-headed monster's meat was all divided. I managed to grab 2 ears. Smiling, I said, "These will help grandfather live longer." He was 59 years old, only one step away from 60. To him, these ears were a promise of longevity. At home, I handed them to my grandmother. She took them to the kitchen to stew. Later, she served the meal. Grandfather put a piece of pig's ear in his mouth, chewing slowly, his face glowing with pleasure. Grandmother smiled, praising the meat again and again. So delicious. The flesh of the pig-headed monster is wonderful, only too hard to catch. As she spoke, she placed another piece of meat into my bowl. "Nugent Fei, try some. See how good it tastes." But ever since I could remember, I had never been able to eat pork. The smell alone made me nauseous. Grandmother looked at me with hopeful eyes. Reluctantly, I put the ear into my mouth, but the moment I bit down, I spat it out. Grandmother frowned. "Look at you, still can't eat pork. Then I will." She picked up the piece I spat out and put it into her own mouth. I said nothing, chewing only on my hard, dry bread. They said the flesh of the pig-headed monster granted long life, so I forced myself to put another piece into my bowl. When I looked up at grandfather, I froze. His neck had grown thicker. His face now bore 2 deep wrinkles, like those of an old boar. I rubbed my eyes, but his neck seemed to swell even more. "Grandfather, your neck. It's getting bigger." He stopped eating and touched his throat. Grandmother came close, her face nearly against his. She smiled and said softly, "No, it hasn't. Don't talk nonsense." But I could see it clearly. At least 3 fingers width larger. I shouted, "It's true. Look in the mirror if you don't believe me." I fetched a mirror and handed it to him. He studied his reflection for a long moment, then said, "My neck is normal." He set the mirror down and continued eating. I felt confused. Why did only I see the change? That night, after supper, grandmother turned off the lamp. Darkness swallowed the house. A while later, moonlight streamed through the window. By its faint glow, I saw grandfather and grandmother sleeping soundly. Their snores echoed like thunder. I looked at grandfather again. His neck was swelling, more and more obvious. Fear gripped me. I wanted to wake him, but before I could, a deafening clap of thunder shook the house. Rain began to pour outside. Startled, I curled beneath my blanket. When I dared to peek out, grandfather was already sitting upright. His head hung low, his face hidden. I whispered grandfather. He gave no reply. Only the pounding rain, and an awful silence filled the room. I pushed grandmother, but she slept deeply, unaware. A flash of lightning illuminated the room. In that instant, I saw his face. The wrinkles had deepened, carved like scars by a knife. He suddenly stood up, walked to the door, and removed the wooden bar. The door creaked open, and a freezing wind swept inside. I called out again, "Grandfather," but he ignored me. My shout woke grandmother. She opened her eyes and asked, "What is it?" "Grandfather went out," I said. She sat up in shock. "Where?" "I don't know. He just opened the door and left." She slapped my head angrily. "Why didn't you wake me sooner? If something happens to him, it will be your fault." She dressed quickly and rushed outside into the storm. I panicked, not daring to stay alone, and ran after her. "Grandmother, let me go with you. I don't want to stay here." But she pushed me back. "Go home. Do not follow me." Then she disappeared into the rain. I crept to the gate, intending to sneak after her. But then I froze. Just a few paces behind her, I saw it. The pig-headed monster, walking silently in the rain, following her. Terrified, I screamed, "Grandmother! Behind you, the monster!" But she did not hear me. Step by step, she vanished into the darkness, and the creature with her. The rain fell harder. The clouds hid the moon, and the night was drowned in blackness. I dared not chase them. Instead, I ran back inside, bolted the door, and curled in a corner, praying for the storm to pass. Yet even by morning, the rain had not stopped. The yard was flooded. Neither grandfather nor grandmother had returned. Only at noon, when the rain finally eased, did I hear voices. I opened the door and saw grandfather. His face was grim, and behind him came several young men from the village. They carried a wooden plank. On it lay a figure covered with a white cloth. They set it down carefully in the yard. The villagers stood in silence. I dared not ask who lay beneath the cloth. By a little after 6 in the evening, the sky was already darkening. The dozen men who had gone searching no longer dared to continue. That night, the village was eerily quiet. It was barely past 8, yet no sound could be heard. Every door and window had been tightly shut. At the far end of the village, in one household, the wife had to step outside during the night. In the countryside, toilets were built separately from the house, so she had no choice but to leave the bedroom. When she returned, she heard strange sounds from the pigsty at the north side of the yard. It was like the low, guttural growl of a pig. She hurried into the kitchen, lit an oil lamp, and went to check. What she saw filled her with terror. The wooden door of the pigsty was wide open. Inside, a dark figure was clutching a pig. Its shadow trembled violently, as if convulsing. Through the weak light of the oil lamp, she caught a glimpse of long, white hair. Frightened, she quickly blew out the flame. She dared not scream. She dared not even run back into the house. Pigsty was surrounded by a 1-meter brick wall, leaving her no way to escape, so she crouched against the wall, shivering through the night until dawn. In the morning, she stumbled back into the house and woke her husband. He asked in confusion, "What happened? Why do you look so shaken?" She told him what she had seen. His face went pale. At once, he grabbed a sickle for protection and went to inspect the pigsty. The sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. Not a single pig remained alive. Each had a deep bite wound across its neck. Blood had soaked the floor, and more than 10 pigs lay dead in a pool of red dot. The news spread quickly. Villagers gathered at the house, some curious, some horrified. Children wanted to follow, but adults stopped them. When they saw the dozens of dead pigs lined on the ground, people murmured in fear. An old man said, "These pigs were drained of blood by Lady Els. Best to burn them at once." Another man argued, "No, it might have been a wild beast. Remember, No was bitten to death just the night before." But others shook their heads. If it was a wild beast, how were the bodies left whole, with only a single tear on the neck? If it were wolves or some other creature, the wounds would be much larger. Besides, the wife saw a human figure last night. Surely it was Lady El. Gradually, most people agreed with this explanation. The village council held a meeting. The headman urged everyone not to panic, to believe in science, and not to give in to superstition. He spoke for hours, but fear lingered in the hearts of the villagers. That afternoon, beneath the ancient tree at the entrance to the village, the fortune teller Vibangu sat talking with a group of young men. Though he was no exorcist, he had some knowledge of spirits and the dead. He explained, "The old woman, Lady Ellis, died unwillingly. Her final breath never left her chest. When the cat touched her corpse, it reawakened her. That is why she rose and killed No. Drinking his blood tainted her with murderous energy. Had her family placed the coffin lid firmly or poured salt water over her, none of this would have happened. But they fled in fear, and now her body has turned into a revenant." The young men asked, "Then what should we do?" Vibangu replied, "Scatter sand before your doors tonight. Spill chicken, blood, or cinnabar to ward her off. They are known to repel evil. Beyond that, you must pray for your own safety." That very night, more livestock were found slaughtered. Their blood had been drained. This time, the victims were from the Ma family. Sometime after midnight, their 10-year-old child ran into his parents' bed, trembling. They soon heard noises at the back gate. Fear gripped them. They sat on the bed all night, too terrified to move. At dawn, they finally dared to investigate. In the backyard, dozens of sheep lay lifeless, their throats torn open. On the wet ground, tiny footprints were clearly visible. Since the liberation, foot binding had been banned in the countryside. Yet these footprints were unusually small, belonging not to a child, but to an elderly woman. The villagers immediately thought of Lady Els. The whole village erupted in panic. Everyone was convinced now that the revenant of Lady Els had returned. To drink blood, some reported the matter to the county police. Officers came, inspected the site for half a day, and left without conclusions. But reckless villagers began organizing groups to hunt for Lady Els' corpse. Once again, they returned empty-handed, and that night, a worse horror unfolded. This time, the victim was not an animal, but a person. It was around 10 o'clock in the evening. Two men, idlers who loved gambling and drink, were coming home from the neighboring village's market. Both were drunk. One of them needed to relieve himself, so he told the other to wait outside. In those days, the village toilets were simple low, brick walls, a few wooden planks, and beneath them, a foul drainage ditch. One of the men stepped. Inside, I heard a loud noise outside, a voice like a crow, yet also like his laughter. A moment later, he heard the piercing scream of his friend. He stood up and looked through the wooden door. In that instant, the alcohol in his body vanished, for he saw a figure in blue, with a silver fur cloak, biting his friend to death. It sank its teeth into his friend's throat. The man struggled, producing muffled gurgles as blood poured from his mouth. The figure was clearly an old woman, her face blackened, her eyes veiled by a grey film like rotten grapes. The horrific sight made her legs give way, and all her filth and urine soaked into her trousers. Moments later, that shadow released its grip, and his friend collapsed lifeless. When the figure drifted away, he pushed open the toilet door in panic. He did not even wipe himself, only ran for his life. He fled towards his home, but as he reached the doorway, he saw the old woman vanish into the forest. The woods were dark, filled with wild grass and towering trees. Even with more than 10 grown men, none dared chase her further. Just then, a Taoist priest from the neighboring village appeared and called them back. He warned them tomorrow was the Ghost Festival, the 14th day of the 7th lunar month, the day when the gates of hell opened and yin energy was at its heaviest. The old woman of the Li family was already steeped in murderous aura. If she inhaled more yin, she would become a true demon. When that happened, none of them would be able to stop her. The men listened in fear. The priest urged them to capture her before the ghostly gate opened. Reluctantly, they pressed on with their search. Not long after, someone discovered bloodstains. On the ground, they followed the trail. Halfway along, a fat man named Tatam accidentally stepped into a hidden pit. His foot slipped and he fell. Luckily, he was not badly hurt. Picking up his fallen torch, he found himself in a vast underground chamber. He crept forward, the flame flickering, and soon realized it was a tunnel. As he searched for a way out, strange noises echoed from the darkness ahead. He raised his torch, and there she was, the old woman of the Li family, clutching a snake in her hand. He watched in horror as she tore off its head, sucking the blood straight from its body with a grotesque delight. Tatam held his breath, terrified even to make a sound. Slowly, he crawled back the way he came, clawed his way up, and finally emerged from the hole. Once outside, he screamed for the others. They gathered, and he told them everything he had seen below. Shock spread through the group. Who would have thought such a hidden lair existed beneath their feet? After some discussion, they agreed to set a trap. They fetched a net soaked in animal blood, ropes of mulberry, and a wooden stake to pierce her heart. They smeared blood over the hole Tatam had fallen into, then hid nearby. Before long, they heard movement below. A dark figure crawled out of the tunnel. It was her. The men lunged, casting the net, pinning her to the ground. They drove the stake towards her chest, but she shrieked in a voice not human, shaking the earth. With frightening strength, she ripped the net apart, seized one of the men, and hurled him to the ground. By the time the others dared approach, he lay bleeding, his spine shattered. That night, terror spread through the village. The Taoist priest declared that the Li family's matriarch had absorbed enough yin energy during the Ghost Festival to become a zombie. Her body was blackened, her soul corrupted, her hunger for blood insatiable. The next evening, they performed a ritual inside the Li household. Talismans were plastered on every wall. An altar was erected, incense and offerings placed, and bowls of chicken blood prepared. The priest warned everyone, do not look directly into her eyes, or she will snatch your soul at 9 o'clock. A roar thundered outside. The doors rattled violently, then burst open. She entered, dressed in a tattered blue robe, her skin charred black, her eyes nothing but a grey film. She advanced step by step. The men shrank back, trembling. Even the priest was shaking, his incantations scattering uselessly in the air with a growl. She seized him, sank her teeth into his throat, and drank deeply. His screams filled the hall until his body went limp. Panic erupted. Blood sprayed across the floor. The villagers screamed and wept. Some soiled themselves in fear. In desperation, one man hurled the remaining bowl of chicken blood at her face. She let out a piercing wail and staggered back, but the nightmare was not yet over. That night, the youngest son of the Li family was found dead, his throat torn out, his house shattered as if by some monstrous force. The terror spread like plague. Surrounding villagers grew restless. At last, an old monk arrived, said to be over 100 years old, once the abbot of a great temple. He declared that the Li matriarch was no longer human but a zombie, animated by resentment and strengthened by blood. The villagers placed their last hope in him. He ordered that she be dragged out of her hiding place before nightfall. With chains around her ankles, she was bound to a pyre, doused in oil, and set aflame. The fire roared, yet she remained standing, shrieking, thrashing against the flames. At last, the chains snapped, and she leapt from the burning woodpile, her body aflame, and vanished into the bamboo forest. The monk and the men gave chase. They surrounded her, chanting, binding her with prayer beads, dousing her in the prepared urine of children. Her body stiffened, her movements slowed. Then, with a solemn face, the monk drove a small thorn into her throat and struck off her head with a sword. Silence fell. The villagers watched in stunned disbelief as the cursed matriarch finally collapsed. Her body was cut into pieces and burned again until nothing remained. Only then did peace return. Yet even years later, those who survived never spoke of it openly. In the village, it became a forbidden tale, whispered only beyond its borders. As others retold it over supper, shivering at the fate of the Lee family and the horror that walked among them.